Okay. All right. I think we've got enough people on. So let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. This is the April branch meeting of the AAUW. We're going to have our guest speaker this evening will be Rachel Tobler from the Redlands Police Department, but we'll introduce her in a little bit. Right now, we're going to do the thought for the month, and it's being presented today by Shirley Harlan. So Shirley, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Am I on? I don't see me.
So she doesn't see herself.
Should I?
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Shirley.
All right. I hope you see what I show. The word of the month is from Jane Hall. Author, her book, Redwall, about herself, among the first female RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Troops in 1977, with similar experiences as myself. That 1956, there it is, 1956 was the earliest documentation she had found so far of a female police officer carrying a gun in her purse. I was that Redlands' first female police officer, and Ethel Mears was the San Bernardino County Sheriff's first policewoman. Look at that picture now and compare it with the patrol uniform Redlands police women wear today. You can remove the picture now. I was assigned to Lieutenant Miles, head of the juvenile division, responsible for women prisoners, sex crimes, and school bicycling training. In an occupation that was dominated by males, I was lucky that the Redlands police chief, with my hiring, moved the department creatively. In such situations, it takes steadfastness, strong credibility, and performance to get acceptance. Now there are many police officers that are moving up the ranks. My career of 30 years in criminal justice has left me with the following comment, considering today's news. I was also responsible for the first California development of required training for all safety employees that included the chokehold and other restrictive containments of persons. Today, police officers need our support like never before, since it is a larger, more diverse, mobile society that duties are performed. We have to educate our society that we will take an oath to uphold laws that provide safety so we can live peacefully to accomplish our aspirations and dreams. When an officer of the law is doing his job, there is a fine line between authority and control and the persons they deal with. It is a very high-risk job that involves handcuffing, jailing, or killing another human being. When that happens, something does happen to the officer as it does in war. We must support and continue ways in police management to balance authority and control issues that occur daily in the duties of police officers and hold responsible for actions. Police women contribute a necessary balance to these daily activities performed. Let's continue hiring more.
Okay, thank you very much, Shirley. That was great. Okay, now, Martha, I'm going to turn it over to you. Martha Lehman is our program vice president, and she's going to introduce our guest speaker for us. Martha? You need to unmute yourself, Martha.
I'm sorry. Thank you. It was my great pleasure to meet Rachel about a year and a half ago when we were still alive in our STEM conferences. We had a lovely lunch after meeting all of our 8th grade girls one time, and we sat and talked for a good hour after the conference and everything. And I thought, wow, this is such a dynamic and just an incredible woman in our community that we needed to know about in our organization and everything. I was totally impressed by her commitment, not only to her profession, but to our community and everything. Rachel has been with the Redlands Police Department since 1998. I think that's 22 years. She doesn't look old enough for that, though. My first comment and everything, and has served in a variety of different positions in the community in the Redlands Police Department. She's also has extensive advanced training in all different areas, including going to, I believe it was Cambridge in England. And so she's one of the things that really impressed me when I was talking to her and reading her bio and learning a little bit more about her was that she has joined several other colleagues in founding the American Society of Evidence-Based Policing. And their mission is to advance policing by interpreting and incorporating the best available evidence-based practices. I'm hoping I'm saying this correctly. Absolutely. To ensure the least harmful, most effective, fairest, and safest strategies to be employed to prevent crime, reduce harm, and improve community wellness. And I think that is really a goal that we all want to reach in our communities. And I'm sure as policemen also want to do that. Police people, persons, whatever. So I really was totally impressed with her, and I think you're going to be very, very impressed with her, not only her commitment, as I say, but her involvement in our community and the good things that she has done here. So I really am very proud to present her this evening, and I'm glad that she was able to make it opportunity in her busy schedule to speak to us tonight. So thank you, Rachel, so much.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you for that very warm and wonderful welcome. I appreciate that introduction, and it's great to see Shirley on here and Catherine and some of you other folks. I don't see everybody up here on the screen, but thank you so much for that. Sue, before I get started, I do have a share screen. I am going to put up a PowerPoint just for some couple of photos and to keep me on track here tonight. Martha, thank you so much for that welcome. I really, really appreciate it. I think one of the highlights in my life or themes, I guess I should say, is this idea of serendipity, that things happen in my life for a reason. And I found myself sitting at a compact dinner, gosh, I don't know, a few years ago now, and happened to sit next to Catherine. And we started talking, and it was a great conversation. And I was talking to her about policing and what I do here at the department. And it led to me being invited to speak at the 8th grade Young Women's Conference for STEM, and ultimately to us having lunch, like you said. So I feel very fortunate that that I've made everyone's acquaintance. And it's great to be here today. And when you asked me to come speak, I know we covered a lot of topics that day at lunch, but I really thought that probably the best thing for me to come and chat about is women in policing. For obvious reasons, I'm interested in it. But ironically, in terms of my research, wasn't really a focus for me probably until the last 6 or 7 years. And I'll tell you a little bit about why. So with all of that said, good evening to everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Shirley, it's great to see you and talk about a true pioneer in our field, paving the way for women like me to be part of this wonderful profession. Thank you so much for that. Martha, you did a great job talking about me, and I will definitely talk a little bit more about what I do here in the department, but I'm hoping tonight to weave together some information about our past, our present, and our future, where we've come from, and where I think we're going in terms of women in this profession. And I would like to start out with a little bit of history before I get there, and then I'll talk more about my story, how I've gone through my 22-year career. You were correct on that. It's hard to believe that it's been that long. And then where I think we're going in the future. So I put these photos up here. Hopefully I can get this. Oops. I thought maybe I could get this bar to go across because it's on top of Shirley, and I don't know. I'm still learning the Zoom thing. Sorry, you all. You'll have to bear with me. But I put up these photos because to me, these women are my real life superheroes. Obviously, Shirley, I showed the photo of her back from the 50s when she was a police officer here in Redlands. But women have been involved in law enforcement for years. And even before 1910, women were matrons, worked in social work and law enforcement. But it wasn't until 1910 that Alice Devon Wells, who's the photograph in the middle, became the first sworn police officer in Los Angeles. And as I was thinking about this talk and sitting down and chatting with you all tonight, I was thinking about historically, you know, all these different firsts for women in law enforcement. First in different departments and first in motor officers. I have a friend who was the first motor traffic officer in DC years and years ago. The first SWAT officer, the first bomb, officer, woman officer. But what was fascinating to me and striking in these photos here is that in the top right-hand corner is the first female chief in the US, and that's Chief Penny Harrington. And Chief Harrington did not become the chief until 1985. So it's 75 years time span between these two photos. And it's fascinating when I think about all how far we've come as women, right? The right to vote, the right to have our own credit cards, the fight for equality, which is still, when it comes to issues of equal pay, I know you all are aware that we're still fighting some of those. But it is fascinating then when I think about just my 22 years or this other 30-year period since Chief Harrington. These other chiefs that are on here down in the lower left-hand corner is Chief Karen Comstock, and she was the chief out in Chino, has recently retired. And definitely a mentor to me and one of the first chiefs here in the Inland Empire area. And then down in the right-hand corner, you may recognize her because she is on the media quite a bit, but Daniel Outlaw, who was the next female chief in Portland much later than Chief Harrington, and is currently in Philadelphia, the first female chief in Philadelphia. So like I said, my real life superheroes. But it was just striking when I think about this time period and all the things that have happened and continue to happen with women in policing. As a side note, and I'll talk a little bit about this later on, a friend and colleague of mine did an interview with Chief Harrington probably about 3 or 4 years ago. And I love hearing the stories about the barriers that she and her sisters had to break down in law enforcement. And one of those had to do with wearing men's clothes and not having ballistics and equipment that would fit women, in the mid early 80s. And I laughed, I kind of chuckled because I said this to a colleague not too long ago. Even when I started in the late 90s and early 2000s, it was hard for me to find women's size clothing. We were still buying men's clothing and having it tailored. And despite the fact that they all made jokes that I look like the guy's little brother with my shorter haircut, we were still buying men's clothes. And I, even in front of you tonight, I'm wearing a tie, right? So still relics of working and living in a predominantly male dominated profession. So while so much has changed in policing over the last 100 years, there's some shocking and staggering numbers to me. If I were to ask you all, in terms of representation, there's about 18,000 police departments in the United States. And if I were to ask you all what you thought the percentage of women were in law enforcement now, what might you all think? And you're welcome to either unmute or put in chat, and hopefully Sue can maybe tell me what the numbers are if they come up, if you're willing to share your thoughts on that. And I don't see, oh, there's one. Of
Yeah.
course, now I have this horrible window thing. Can you tell me what we have, Sue, since I now put this window?
4%, 12%, 5 to 10%, 15%, 10%. Yeah, anywhere from
So-
5 to 15.
So what that tells me is that you all did your homework before I came tonight. That's what that tells me. So ironically, there's someone had it, the 12%. That 12% of women in law enforcement has been stagnant for about the last 20 years. And when it comes to chiefs, it's even smaller. It's about 2 to 3%. So you all can do the math, right? For these 18,000 different jurisdictions, how many women really are out there. So it's shocking to me, and was shocking when I heard one of my colleagues say that to me. And it has a lot of us asking, why is this? Especially when other countries like Canada, New Zealand, UK have much higher representation, much closer to parity. And I think it's a good question, and it's definitely one that's getting a lot of interest recently. So let's see if I can move to the next slide. And now I have this little box that I can't get rid of, so I apologize to you all. So now that you have a little bit of context, right, an idea of the history of policing and where we're at in terms of representation currently, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. And you're probably looking at this slide with the box and everything else because I'm still technologically challenged. And wondering what in the world a really much older car, me and a retired police chief have in common. And what I'll tell you is it is a parking ticket. So that is how I got my start here at Redlands Police Department, was actually a parking ticket. I came to Redlands in '94 to go to the University of Redlands. And in '97 as a junior, I was still driving this amazing car that I bought for $50 and I loved until the wheels fell off of it. And I'm sure it'll be a shock to hear that the battery happened to die. So I had it towed back to where I was living, and it was dropped off facing the wrong direction. And the following morning I came out and there was a parking ticket on my car. And of course I was just beside myself. In college, $25 was a huge amount to pay. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do. So I talked to my boss at the time. I was working in the audiovisual department, and Glenn said, "Hey, Rachel, we're doing a project for this captain at the department. His name's Jim Bierman. Maybe go talk to him." So I came down to the police annex, which is the building I'm sitting in speaking to you all today. I think it was slated to be the museum at one point, but we've been here, I think, I don't know, well over 26 years, I think, at this point. And I came down here and I met with Captain Bierman, and I told him my whole sob story, and he listened. And he said, "Rachel, I'm really sorry. I don't think I can do anything about your ticket, but why don't you tell me about yourself?" So I told him all about my interest in law enforcement. My parents were involved in forensic science, so I grew up around local and federal law enforcement. I knew I wanted to go into law enforcement. I thought I wanted to be an FBI agent. For those of you who remember Silence of the Lambs, I thought I was going to be in the behavioral analysis unit, and this is what I thought I was going to do. And I was telling him that I was in Prudian honors at University of Redlands and that I needed to do a project. And he said, "Well, tell you what, I can't do anything about your ticket, but I have an internship for you. And so if you are interested, when you come back," it was the end of my junior year, "when you come back your senior year, call me and we'll get you set up." So I came back and I thought, there's no way that this chief is going to remember, or captain's going to remember who I am, but he did. And that's how I got my start in 1997 as an intern, gathering research and looking at risk-focused policing. And I've got to tell you all, I fell in love. I fell in love with our community because I learned about our community in a totally different way in community engagement. I fell in love with our department, and I knew that local law enforcement was what I wanted to do. So thankfully, at the end of my senior year, I finished my project, my internship, and there were openings at the department. And they asked me, was I interested in being an officer? And I said, absolutely, sign me up. So off I went to the police academy. And this is a whole bunch of firsts because we started out talking about firsts as well. And when I went to the police academy, it's a 6-month academy, definitely an experience I had never experienced before. I'd never been involved in the military, paramilitary experience. And I want to say there were probably 6 women that started, and there were 4 of us that actually graduated. And one of the gals had started with a different agency, but she ended up laterally coming over here to Redlands Police Department later on, and she's now actually one of our sergeants. So I graduated, came to work, started working on patrol. I worked a variety of different assignments. I know Martha alluded to that in the intro. We all come to patrol. Patrol is the backbone of policing. I love patrol and had the opportunity to work as an officer, a corporal, and a sergeant. I was a field training officer. We developed a liaison program with parole. So we were working with folks that were coming out of the prison system and reentry. I was a corporal and worked as a detective, special victims. I was a range master, which I think I may have been still might be the only female range master, so firearms instructor here. And as a corporal, I was the 2nd female corporal that we'd ever had in the organization. When I started also, we had 3 women, one of which she retired shortly after I got here, and 2 women. And over the course of my career, I've seen us swell up to about 14%. And now we're closer, I guess I probably should look directly at the numbers, but I think we're closer to about 10%, hovering right between that 10 to 12% now. So when I promoted to sergeant, I was the first female sergeant we'd ever had, and thankfully not the only, because Claudia has since promoted and then promoted to lieutenant a few years ago and have been reclassified as a commander. And so currently I oversee all of our patrol services bureau, so 7 patrol teams that are out in the community 24/7, answering calls for service, and being your first responders, what you typically think as officers, in patrol cars. And then that also includes the field training program, reserves, explorers, and then also the community policing unit. And that includes all of our traffic. I say all of our traffic unit, which is a couple of motors now, our school resource officers, community policing, and homeless outreach is what I'm doing currently now. But definitely a whole bunch of firsts during my career. What I can tell you is that I probably the first 3/4 of my career, I never felt that it was a difficult work environment due to gender. And that's not always the same story for some of my friends and colleagues and other women in law enforcement, but we definitely were well accepted and received. And as long as we proved that we could go out and do the job and we weren't lazy, there was no difference, right? And that would have been the same for anyone, and it's the same for any coworker that you have, right? You want to know that they can do the job, that they can do it well, and that they're going to take up their slack. They're going to do what they need to do. And it really wasn't until I had been an officer for about 15 years, so at that time I was a sergeant, that I realized that I was different. And you all might laugh, right? Because all I have to do is look in the mirror and realize I am a woman and I am different. But it wasn't until I got pregnant and went to have my kids that I realized that my life was different, and the balance that I needed to be able to do this job, because it is a wonderful profession and I love it, but there's a lot that's involved and a lot of responsibility. So when I had my first child, that's when I realized that something was different. And around the same time, I know we talked a little bit about my education. I had already gone back to UC Irvine. I'd gotten a master's at UC Irvine. And then I had gone to Cambridge in 2009, and graduated in 2011, which is where the American Society of Evidence-Based Policing, some of my friends and colleagues from there that were officers from throughout the US, that we developed ASCPP, which was developed it's a nonprofit under the umbrella of the Police Foundation. which you see down there, and which is also a research organization. And I'll talk a little bit more about National Institute of Justice down there as well. But when all of these things were kind of going on in my life, and so I was having these conversations with my other friends and colleagues in other parts of the world, realizing that I was trying to figure out, how do I not sleep and then be on call? How do I deal with childcare in the middle of the night? How do I deal with pumping? All these different things, right? So I don't need to belabor the point. But we developed ASCBP, and then around the same time, National Institute of Justice was developing a program called the Law Enforcement Advancing Data and Science Program. And it was to help law enforcement leaders grow in the use of data, science, research, and policing. And I had been accepted into the program because of my work with ASCBP and the development of the organization. And all of a sudden, I was just surrounded by like-minded people from all over the country. But what was even more fascinating to me is I was going to these national conferences, and I was seeing a lot of women in leadership roles that I didn't necessarily see here. And I know you all have heard the idea, if you see it, you can be it, right? But all of a sudden I could see it. And I had never really thought about promoting or being a command staff member, or even about being a chief, until all of a sudden I saw all these strong women in these positions, and it was amazing. So out of the LEADS program, a group of women, we started talking about the challenges, how do you recruit women? How do you retain women? What do we know about women in policing? And from that, Maureen McGough, and I'll show a video of her here shortly, which moves us kind of into the present day, had this brainchild of, hey, we need to have a summit on women in policing, and we need to talk about, what do we know about women in policing? What does the research say? And why are these numbers at 12% when other countries aren't? And so in 2018, they convened the Summit on Women in Policing, and I was fortunate to attend and be a panelist. And our chief, I worked it out, and our chief was definitely willing and open to have Claudia, who's now a sergeant, go with me, because I wanted for her to see this as well. Because I think sometimes, with only one first female in an organization, it's amazing to see it on that level. And so it was academics, practitioners, and other folks involved in all kinds of industry, but predominantly law enforcement. And we talked about what research is there. And when we left there, they ended up doing this report. I can share the link if anyone's interested in it, because it came out with a big report. There were different partnerships. I've done some research with some friends, some academics, and Renee on women in elite positions in policing and women's experience in policing. And some of those are still in the process of evaluation and publication. And what came out of it, though, was this idea that the general body of research showed that when it came to women, they tend to use less force and less excessive force. They tend to be named in fewer complaints and lawsuits, tend to be perceived by their communities as being more honest and compassionate. And they tend to see better outcomes for crime victims, especially in sexual assault. And this really, like I said, this summit led to a whole bunch of different projects, but one of the projects was this idea 30 by 30, which is an initiative that was just launched actually this last month. And it has to do with increasing representation of women to 30% by the year 2030. And if you all will grant me, I know I'm running a little late. Am I okay on time, Sue? I hope.
Yeah, you're fine. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Then I'm going to see if I can open up this little news clip, and I'll play it for you, and then wrap this up and answer any questions that you all might have.
Make up only 12% sworn police officers and 3% of police leadership. 38 policing agencies are coming together to change that. McGough, Chief of Staff of the Policing Project at NYU School of Law, joins us to talk more about this. Good morning. Thank you for being with us, Maureen.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Tell us about this new initiative and what the goal is.
Sure. So as you mentioned, women only make up 12% of sworn officers, 3% of police leaders. Not only are those numbers pretty dismal, but they've been stagnant for decades. And research shows the really unique value of women officers. So women officers use less force and excessive force. They have better relationships with diverse communities. They get better outcomes for crime victims. They're even named in complaints and lawsuits less. So 30 by 30 is a national initiative to try and get to 30% representation of women in police recruit classes by 2030, to advance representation of women in all ranks of the department, and also ensure that police department culture, policies, and practices adequately support the diverse representation in their agency. Our very first effort in this national initiative launched on Thursday. As you mentioned, it's a pledge. It's a series of low and no cost things that agencies can start doing today to improve representation and also improve the experiences of women who are already working in the department. And actually, as of this morning, we're at 44 agencies who have signed the pledge, including many major metros. We've got NYPD, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Las Vegas. We're hoping for 250 agencies in the first year, and I have no doubt that we're going to get there.
You talk about no cost or low cost things that can be done to improve representation for women in policing. What are some of those steps that need to be taken to have this change occur by the year 2030, if not before?
That's a great question. So, one of the big problems we have in the US, especially as compared to some of the other developed countries who are a lot closer to parity, is a problem of diagnosis. So each jurisdiction is going to be a little bit different. And we need to understand exactly at what point in these processes we're starting to lose women. So a lot of it really is around data collection. Some of it is around basic best practices, right? Ensuring that, nursing mothers who are returning to work have a safe and appropriate place to pump that isn't their cruiser or a bathroom. Some of it is really changing the content of recruitment materials. A lot of recruitment materials out there tend to sort of overemphasize the really physical aspects of the job. And we're saying to agencies, it's time to start getting accurate about what it takes to be a good police officer. Let's celebrate the qualities of empathy and emotional intelligence that are so critical and are so sort of undervalued in how we talk about what it takes to be a good police officer. And we think when you start making those changes and improving the accuracy of what the job entails and what it takes to be a good officer, you'll naturally start seeing an increase in representation of women in all ranks.
And
So I'll go ahead and finish there. She goes on to talk a little bit more about the project and what's going on with it. And, I think that to look to the future, where we're going in the future, it really is a matter of understanding it. Like I said, I was very, very fortunate coming into an organization that's been very supportive and highly recruiting women. Not all agencies are that way, but even then, like I said, we've lost folks through attrition, through a variety of different reasons over time. And it's always a good idea to be able to study that, look at the numbers, and look at what does the research say about, changes that might be able to be made, or just the basic necessities and some of the things I shared with my experience being a woman, and having children and experiencing that. So I think that the good news is, or to me anyway, and for obvious reasons, it's a fascinating topic. The good news is there are lots of people around the country that are working on it right now. And I feel like it's a really exciting time to be part of it, both locally and nationally. And I really want to say thank you to you all, not only for giving me the opportunity to come and present and talk to you all a little bit about this tonight, about myself, but also for involving me in the STEM program as a speaker, because to me, I see that as an opportunity to speak with these young women, let them know that some of the interests that they may already have are really applicable to this job. And, that this is, I mean, it definitely is a calling, but it's a very rewarding and wonderful profession. And I just appreciate you all giving me the opportunity to be here and to speak with these young women. In fact, I will share with you, I have had one of the students reach out to me to get involved with the Explorer program once we get back up and running after COVID. So to me, that's exciting. Even one person may make the difference, as we're looking at these recruitments later on down the road. So thank you all so much. And I am happy to answer any questions. I saw some chats going up, but hopefully, Sue, you can
Yes.
moderate that for me.
Yes, we've got a couple of questions, and if anybody else has a question, just type it in the chat and I will relay it to Rachel. The first one is from Ellen Grunbaum, and she says, do women police officers as a whole have greater sensitivity toward racial injustices? If this is so, this could be helpful in changing racial injustices that are distressing our country.
So I don't know if there's research that specifically speaks to the sensitivity of racial difference. I mean, clearly I'm talking about women as a broad group, and there's a huge intersectionality component that we haven't talked about tonight, right? When you talk about race, ethnicity, amongst women, we're not all the same and see the world the same way. But I certainly, it appears that we tend to have a high EQ, emotional intelligence, and the capacity to have a high degree of empathy, which seems to be definitely a success factor for us in law enforcement. But I don't know whether or not there's actually been research that could say specifically that that's the case. I mean, certainly that's something that we're all dealing with right now, and is, I think, on the forefront of everyone's mind when it comes to policing, so it's a good question.
Okay, and we have another one from Catherine Brown. She says, do you feel any unreasonable barriers for women officers based on physical characteristics like strength, agility, etc., that any of those physical characteristics remain as barriers?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. And as I was putting this together and trying to be mindful of time, there's a video that a colleague of mine and one of my board members with AAUW, she recognized, and this was in New Jersey, but, and I think that's where it goes back to what Maureen was saying, right? That we have to look at each jurisdiction, there's jurisdictional differences. So the long story short is, yes, there are still physical limitations or issues that arise, but I think that you can work around them if you understand what they are. So here's the example. With Yvonne, what she found was they had this huge dropout of women in the academy, and she couldn't figure out why that was happening. And what she found was that there was an expectation in the academy. So they were hiring these women. They weren't necessarily preparing them for the academy. And there was an expectation that the women would be able to accomplish the physical components within the first 10 physical training sessions. Well, the reality is that we don't tend to be as strong in our upper body, right, as men. And so you could overcome that if you train for it and you prepare for it. But if you haven't trained and prepared for it, then there's a good chance that you aren't going to pass that element in the academy. So what she did is develop basically a women's leadership academy, preparing all these women that were interested in law enforcement to be successful physically in the academy. And she saw a really great outcome. And one of our peers from the LEADS program, he's now a chief in Nebraska, he took her model and brought it to Nebraska, and is very much a supporter of women in law enforcement, and has basically replicated that model. So if you recognize that that's a problem in an academy, there's a way around it, but you have to recognize that it's an issue to begin with. And the other thing is, I think, reevaluating standards. I know the military, and when we did the summit, on one of the panels, there was a woman from the military speaking about the fact that they were reassessing the physical agility. What do you actually do as part of your job in terms of being physically fit? Clearly, this is a very physical job, and there is a need to be in good physical condition and have the ability to be able to defend yourself, and sustain a long career without injury. But with that said, there's no longer, at least to my knowledge, any height requirements, weight requirements, those kinds of things that were kind of set as artificial barriers. So hopefully that was a lot of information, Catherine, but hopefully that answered your question and talked about some of the variability across the board.
Okay, and I think we have one more from Erica Wilson.
Sure.
She says, does more women in the military translate to more women in policing?
And that's a great question. I could not say definitively that it does, but certainly no different than when men, have been in the military and then get out of the military. We certainly see a lot of women that have the military background, that are looking to go into law enforcement. I don't know if there's a direct positive correlation. I would guess that there is, but without actually looking at those numbers, I couldn't say for sure.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I think that's all the questions that I see in the chat. We really appreciate you coming and speaking to us, and we appreciate you serving with our STEM program as well. That's been a great service to us as far as the STEM program is concerned. So
It's my
thank you.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you're not required to stay for the rest of the meeting, but if you would like to, you're welcome to. So
I may stay for a little while and then try to get home to my little people, my little ones. So
okay.
thank you.
All right, Erica, you want to unmute yourself and show your video, and you and Catherine and Amy are next. Okay.
Okay, hold on.
Hello. So we are going to talk about the book club, but we have some unfinished business first that I wanted to deal with from our February meeting. Because as you know, in February, or maybe you remember, we had our named gift honorees awards were given, and that was Sue Wallace and Cindy Perkins. But we have one more named gift honoree, and that is a person that I'm going to give you some clues about, and then maybe you can guess who she is. So she grew up in a small town that only had 3,000 people in it when she graduated from high school. When she went off to college, she went to a college that had some very famous graduates, including Senator Amy Klobuchar, Bob Dylan, Kate Millett, Jessica Lange, Lonnie Anderson, Cheryl Strayed, and Yanni. Now she's retired recently, and she has a lot of interests. She enjoys yoga, watching This Old House on TV, and is a member of the Master Gardeners Club. She also has 2 darling dogs. If you've ever been to her home, they're very gregarious and sweet. As a member of AAUW, she has been a Footlighters event volunteer, making cookies for intermission and serving on the organizing committee. Most of her know her best for her leadership in the AAUW Reading and Rainbow Book Club. For years, she hosted the annual book selection party at her home. Now, I don't know if you have figured out who this nominee is yet or not, but just in case, we have one more clue. Erica Wilson is going to sing a little song that she's prepared for our honoree.
Okay, and I'm going to put the words to it up on a share screen so you can see it. We had originally hoped that everybody could sing along, but evidently when you try and do that with Zoom, you can't sync it. So we would all be on at different times. So I'm going to sing it, and I hope that you will follow along. Now, I'd really wanted to get Frank Sinatra to come and sing this song since it's his song, but he's dead. So you're just going to have to put up with me. So anyway, let me see if I can share the screen. Okay, that'll do. Can you read it? Here we go. Always a reader, that's Amy. She loves her books, that's Amy. Ever and ever fascinating reading gives our minds the freedom to stray. We thank you, Amy, for your love of books each day. Amy's a woman of importance, likes to read, that's important. We've read I Am Malala and the Alice Network, where the crawdads sing Trevor Noah and more. Amy keeps our book club well informed. Always a reader, that's Amy. She loves her books, that's Amy. Ever and ever fascinating reading gives our mind the freedom to stray. We thank you, Amy, for your love of books each day. We love to read with Amy. On, that's Amy. We've read The Silent Patient and the other Americans, Talking Trees and Women Who Dive. Soon our discussions will be back to live. Let's keep reading with Amy. More books to read with Amy. Island of Sea Women, Hidden Valley Road, Nickel Boys are all on the way. We'll get through COVID as a group this way. Always a reader, that's Amy. She loves her books, that's Amy. Fascinating reading, reading and the rainbow gives our minds the freedom to stray. We thank you, Amy, for sending books our way. So now, do you know who the next gift honoree is?
Congratulations, Amy Bizik. We're happy to add you to the list. We have 15 or 16 women at the meeting tonight who have gotten this award, and we really thank you for all your leadership this year and before.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks, Catherine. And Erica, that was fantastic. Even though we didn't see your screen, we didn't see the words. No, we didn't. But we could hear you just fine. So it was great. It was great. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
you.
I'm sorry. I have that if anybody wants a copy of it.
All right.
Amy, you want a copy of it?
I'm sure she does. Yes. Amy, congratulations. It's well deserved. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. All right. We're going to move on now a little bit. The next thing on the agenda is we have or Catherine, did you guys need to say anything about the book club? Was there an announcement you needed to make?
Well, actually, that was a bit of a ruse to get Amy on screen.
I know.
But the truth is, we are going to be meeting live May 27th, which is our book nomination date, excuse me. And Amy was going to say a little bit about why we need nominations and how you go about it. Excuse me.
Okay. Amy?
I think you're mute, Amy.
Amy, we're having trouble hearing you. No, it's you're cutting in and out.
Well, anyway, we want everybody to think about the books they've read this last year and come to our meeting on May 27th, which is going to be at the Cabana near my home. There'll be a notice that goes out, and it needs to be a book that you have read and that you would recommend. And then after that, we're all going to vote anonymously over the next month or two and pick our books for next year. It'll be a dinner meeting. We'll have pizza and salads, and I'll get out more information to you. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Amy. Okay. We're going to move on now. I've got a little presentation here to make. I'm going to share my screen. It's a presentation on the vote to change the AAUW national bylaws. And so I'm going to make the presentation, and then at the end, I know there are people who do not agree with the national board who is pushing this bylaw change. And if you have something that you want to say about this in support of or opposed to, you will have a chance to do that at the end of the presentation. And you can, at that point, then raise your hand or in the chat note, and I will give you the power to speak. We still won't be able to see you, but you will have the power to speak. So let me continue with the presentation first, and then I'll open it up for anybody who wants to say anything. The mission of AAUW is to advance gender equity for women and girls through research, education, and advocacy. And the vision of the AAUW is equity for all, especially for women. Open membership and inclusion. Diversity. AAUW needs to include members with diverse backgrounds and perspectives to meet our mission and address society's needs of today. AAUW vision, the equity for all, our membership practices should align with our vision and goals, and currently they do not. The alternate pathways to education. There are many ways to get educated, not just universities. On-the-job training, career technical education, life experiences. And this change in the bylaws, which would do away with the requirements that you have to have either a AA degree from an accredited college or a university degree, a bachelor's degree, doing away with that requirement would recognize that there are other ways to education besides going to college. Currently right now, those who are eligible to be a member of AAUW include women, men, non-binary people with a bachelor's degree or higher from a four-year college or university, or women, men, non-binary people with an Associate of Arts degree from a two-year college. Those people who are ineligible are those persons who began but did not complete their studies. Let's say, for example, you went to 3 years of college, but you never got your degree. Working professionals who do not have a college degree. And it's amazing to me to note that Lilly Ledbetter, a national leading voice in the fight for pay equity, is not eligible to join AAUW. Neither was Eleanor Roosevelt, and neither is Oprah Winfrey. So that kind of gives you a perspective to look at here as far as the membership is concerned. If we drop the degree requirement, can we say that we still care about education? Education and educational initiatives are foundations to our mission and work. It's always been and always will be a focus for AAUW. Our mission also included promoting women's economic security, but we don't require members to meet a certain income level. Our current endowment ensures that AAUW will continue to be a leader in funding women's graduate education. Another question that some people have had is the only reason that this change is being proposed is to increase membership? And no, eliminating the degree requirement will not substantially probably increase our membership. It didn't in 1987 when we decided to include men and allow them to join, nor in 2005 when we included those with associate degrees. The main reason is to advance gender equality. And what will we have to change our name if we drop the educational requirement? The answer is no. We did not change our name when we added men, nor did we change it when we accepted associate degrees from colleges. And so there is no plan to change the name of American Association of University Women. The voting will take place between April the 7th to May the 17th. You will be sent a personalized email with online instructions. If you do not have an email, you may request a paper ballot by calling the national at the number that you see there on the screen until April the 16th, and then they will send you a paper ballot. So you will have between April the 7th to May the 17th to cast your ballot. And I urge all of you to do that, whether you are in support of this or whether you are opposed to it. It's very, very important that you go ahead and vote in this case. It will pass only if there is a majority vote from the members of AAUW, not from those that are voting, but from all of the membership. So if you want to see this pass, you really need to vote. But if you're opposed to it, you also really need to vote. So that's a little presentation, and I'll stop sharing the screen here and look. And it seems like we have some people right now who would like to share their opinions. So let me figure out who this is, let's see. I'm trying to find out who would like to speak. Put it in the chat window. If you want to speak, please put it in the chat window, because I'm not seeing raised hands. Okay. Anybody? I'll give a few minutes here. I know.
Can you read Cassie McDuff's posting in the chat?
Okay, Cassie, did you want to talk? Here, let me give you.
I think her microphone's not working, is what she said.
Cassie, your microphone's not working, is it? Okay. Yeah, Cassie posted. Let me read what Cassie posted in the. She has posted the comments at the top of the chat, but let me read you what she posted, because I think you might find her viewpoint interesting. Kathy says, it's not allowing me to read the very first part of it here. Let me see if I can do it this way. Okay. Let me go back to the chat window.
I can see it. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, can you read it?
Yes, she says, well, I understand AAUW leadership's desire for inclusivity. The removal of the requirement for a higher education degree is not needed to provide an opportunity for young women to support equality of opportunity for women, as AAUW leaders suggest in their pitch to throw out AUW's requirement. A number of other organizations, for example, NOW, National Organization for Women, provides such a venue without the need for post-secondary degree. What makes AAUW unique is that its members personify what women can achieve with post-secondary degrees. If we wish to cease providing role models for young women to show that post-secondary degrees can help them pursue specialized careers, then by all means eliminate that requirement. But then, wait a second. But then why continue AAUW as a freestanding organization? Why not join forces with groups such as NOW that have no degree requirement? If, on the other hand, AAUW wishes to continue inspiring young women to pursue post-secondary degrees, then let it remain as a unique group of women who will serve as role models to young women, inspiring them to continue their educations past 12th grade. I strongly oppose the proposal that AAUW should eliminate its requirement that its members hold post-secondary degrees already, including 2-year community college degrees. Please let AAUW remain as the inspiring role models that they are. Otherwise, we cease to be university women. Cassie McDuff,
okay.
Redlands chapter.
All right. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to the issue one way or the other? Nelda, I know that you had said something about you were on the fence on this one. Do you want to say anything? I've just given you the right to talk. So if you'd like to say something.
Well, I had been concerned about this because, as I mentioned before, I'm very proud of my degree and a master's. And I think Cassie is right that we do set ourselves up for role models. I'm still a little fence sitting on this thing. We have to have a goal for these people to get their degrees. And even if you are a leader, say Ledbetter, she could also decide to go and put the effort in to get a degree and get it if she wanted to.
Right. Yeah, I knew you had your doubts about this too. So that's why I wanted to give you a chance to say something if you wanted to. Is there anybody else that would like to say something about this issue one way or the other? I would highly recommend that you go on the national website and take a look at all of the information that they have there about this vote. It is important. They've tried this before. And it did not succeed. So that there's no guarantee that it's going to pass. But again, I wanted everybody to have the opportunity to hear both sides of the issue here so that you can make the decision for yourself. And then I do urge you, when you get the email from the national that has the ballot on it, to cast your ballot. And if you don't have an email address, then call that number and make sure that you request a ballot to be sent to you so that you can have a chance to vote on this. Let's see, Catherine Brown says, I agree with Ellen and am in favor of the change. So I know we have, people on both sides of the issue here. I just wanted to give everybody a chance and an opportunity to voice their opinion as best we could here. Okay. I would also recommend, Shirley, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes. I've thought about this a little bit, and there have been many organizations that have tried to change their membership requirements in order to get more diversity. But I know of none that have been successful in doing that. And that's okay. If we want to, if there are issues that we want to stress, we can build a coalition with those other groups that we're trying to reach diversity with. When you mentioned Eleanor Roosevelt, we could have joined a group that she was working in when she was going across the country. And the same with Oprah. She has a book club and we have a book club. So those we can reach an activity of diversity without changing our membership, because I think that was a good point that Cassie made.
Yeah. Okay, Erica?
I think, one of the things that AAUW has always, dealt with is that we have a reputation for being something of an elitist organization. And this would be a step towards changing that view that people have of us. Now, I think it will take more than just changing our name, but I do think that that's a good step, that that we be viewed more as an inclusive organization and not an exclusive organization. So.
Okay, and Ellen Grunbaum had also wrote something in the chat. She said, I was reluctant to join AAUW for many years because I thought it might sort of was sort of elite. I know wonderful older women who are not qualified to join. I was not inspired by AAUW before as role models, though I loved what AAUW did for scholarships. But now I want to see more people of diverse backgrounds and would be very pleased to see these rules change. So again, we've got, a lot of different opinions here. So I also would suggest that if you want to make a statement about this particular issue, send it to Kay Dobberton so that she can put it in the next newsletter that we have coming out in May. because it will go out before the vote closes on May the 17th. So if you really want it, send her an editorial that you want to have her publish in the branches and twigs. So that's a possibility as well. Catherine Brown said that she agreed with Ellen and she's in favor of it as well. Eileen Sanborn says, isn't it wonderful that we live in a democratic republic and have the right to vote? I've certainly gone back and forth on this change. I believe I'm leaning in favor of voting in favor of it now. So anyway, so yeah, we've, lots of different information going on here back and forth. All right, let's move on to the next part of our program, and that is our happy birthdays. Let me bring up our share on the screen here with you. If I can get to it, there we go. Whoops. Nope, that's not it. Okay. Hold on just a second here. Let me get to it. I know it's here. There we go. All right, now I can share it. Okay. All right, this month's birthdays. Happy birthday to Pat Belk, Monica Harwood, Barbara Kraus, Susan Miller, Jerry Stolley, and Trudy Waldron. Those were all the ladies who had birthdays this month. So happy birthday, everybody. Wish we could sing you happy birthday.